Good Monday morning. Here we are. Once again, welcome to the Men of Iron podcast. This is Scott Davis coming to you again from sunny Tampa, Florida. This is the second Monday of November. Yep, that's right. We are racing towards Thanksgiving. We talked about that a little bit last week, how we're zipping right through the seasons of life at a breakneck speed. A large part of because we are being influenced by our society and by retailers around us, and there's all types of different influences in our life that right now that makes life seem like it's just speeding by. You ever feel that way? Well, last week we kicked off this topic of influence with influence defined. We talked about a definition. And a definition of influence that we came up with was the power or ability to change or affect someone or something, especially the power to cause changes without directly forcing those changes to happen. That's influence. We talked about how when there's changes happening around you because of you, and you're not even forcing that or even asking it to happen, it's just happening because of your influence. Your influence is being successful. And sometimes that happens and we don't even know it, right? And it's probably better that we don't really know it. We talked about how influence adds impact to others versus fame. Fame brings the spotlight to the person. It's all about them. Where influence is on the other people. The influence on the other people's lives to move them to a better place. We also talked about how some very important things have to combine in our lives, like authenticity. We have to be authentic when we're living our life before others. Humility. Humility is important in influence. Integrity is supremely important. We have to be a man of our word. We have to live what we say, be a man of integrity and truth and honor. And consistency. Consistency is extremely important because it takes time. It takes time to have influence in other people's lives, because if you have these things, these characteristics embedded in who you are, in your DNA, then it builds trust in people. People realize because you're consistent, because you live with integrity, because you're a humble person about it and you're authentic, you're really who you are all the time, they can trust you. And when they trust you, you can influence their life for good to help them move to a better place. So that's influence defined. Today, let's talk about influence realized. So I want you to think about that question. Do I really have influence? I mean, really. Am I really influencing anybody? And you say, Scott, you know what, man? I got kids. I can't even influence them to pick up their dirty laundry, And I get it. I understand what you're saying. But not long ago, I was in a restaurant and I saw a family. The father, there was a couple of 2-3 kids. The mom was talking to a child. The child was actually talking back to her at the same time she was talking. And the dad was talking to the other 2 kids, and they were actually talking to each other, not listening to him. And I'm sitting there, I almost laughed because it took me back to a time in my life when my kids were little. And I'm like, come on, there's like 5 people over there talking at the same time. Nobody's hearing anybody. And maybe that's how you feel sometimes. Maybe that's how you feel in your workplace. Maybe that's how you feel in your home, or Lord help, maybe even in your marriage, that you're talking and nobody's listening. Well, don't think because of that you don't have influence. I promise you there's people being influenced by your life. That's why we have to concentrate on who's in front of us at all times and do it consistently and do it authentically with this humility and integrity, because that's who God wants us to be. A godly influence, a godly person that can be trusted. Our authentic life of integrity will model truth, and that brings trust, and that's very attractive, and it will eventually cultivate the influence of our life in other people's lives. So it takes time. I love the quote by Craig Rochelle, just about on every one of his podcasts. He says, people want to follow a leader, or in this case, a person who is always real, not a person who is always right. And that's so true. If you're not authentic in who you are and being a real person consistently with integrity, you're not going to build trust. Therefore, you're not going to influence anybody. But the fact is, even if we're being a bad influence, we're influencing people. And we can look around us. We all have a circle of influence. And we must realize that we are, in fact, influencing these people in the circle that God's put in our life. And the initial step to being a good influence or a better influence is the realization that we are an influencer. And so today, that's a challenge. I want you to think about that. This is what we talk about at Men of Iron all the time. Changing a culture one man at a time. A culture, not the culture. When we change a culture, eventually the culture gets changed. You say, Scott, what do you mean by that? Well, a culture means each man that's impacted by Men of Iron through mentorship, small groups, retreats, and even the free resources. Every man is influenced in their culture. Their culture is their circle of influence. The people in their life, their world, is being influenced by them. And so, therefore, we're changing a culture. And I love it, the way we put that as an individual emphasis on each man. So who is in your circle? Who are you thinking about right now that could possibly, maybe you've never even thought about this? And Craig Rochelle also asked his guest, when's the first time you realized in your life that you could be a leader, that maybe you were a leader? And just about without fail, every guest will tell him, it was back when I was in school when I was picked to be the captain of a team, or it was back at a certain place, a certain job, a certain time, and this happened. And I realized that, hey, I'm a leader. And we learned last week, if you know anything about John Maxwell, leadership is influence. So therefore, I want you to think about that today. When was it in your life you first realized that you had influence? Maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't realized that yet. Well, today I hope this really stirs your heart and your mind that you do have a circle of influence. And what I mean by that is the people that are in your life. Realize that you are making an impact in their life, and it could be good, but it also could be bad. So this week, as simple as this sounds, I want you to think about this and actually take the time to write the names down on a little private list, or put it in your notes in your phone, do something, but write down these people, who they are. Who are these people? This list of people could contain maybe your wife, your kids, your neighbor, a coworker, even a close friend, or an acquaintance. I mean, these are the people that are in our lives, right? These are the people that we have influence, whether we know it or not. If we could interview each one and ask them, is there anything that you have influenced them in? I'm sure there would be something. Back when I had the privilege to be over a department in our fire department in Atlanta, where I was working in Gwinnett County, I had the privilege to run our recruit training program for a while, and put over 300 recruits through school and see them go out successfully into the field and become firefighters. And every now and then, I retired from the fire service back in 2014, so it's been a minute. But every now and then I will get a message from one of those recruits who are now captains and lieutenants, and they'll quote things to me that I told them. And to be honest, I don't even remember those conversations most of the time, but I did say those things. I remember that, but it was an influence. It was an impact on their life, and it helped to form who they are now as a firefighter, which makes me proud. It also makes me think I'm glad that I lived a life of integrity and character and was authentic and consistent because people were watching more than I even knew. You influence people on different levels as well. I mean, it's going to be different for a neighbor or a child or even your own child versus a coworker. It's going to be different levels of influence, but they all must include those important aspects and points of character that we've been discussing. These are so super important. Authenticity, integrity, humility, consistency, because as you remember, this is what builds trust. This must be who we are as we move in our thinking and realization of our own influence, and hope that you're getting there now today, realizing that you have influence, and we move towards the specialization of our influence. So think about it. Write these people down, make the list. And if you never realize this or admit to it, your impact will never totally be what God's designed for your influence to bring. Did you get that? Remember, influence adds impact to other people's lives. It means it changes their life. It moves them to a better place. It brings real impact that's important to form who they are becoming, hopefully, in Christ. It should move them to a better place. So this is where we're going to pick up the conversation next Monday. After we realize we have influence, we can then think about how God has specifically designed us to be a special person with a specialized influence for the circle of influence that He's placed us in, the circle of people that God has created us to be able to reach and influence and bring impact to their life. So tune in next Monday as we continue to discuss the topic of influence. We're going to move on and discuss influence specialized. And don't forget, make your circle, make your list, make your circle list this week of the people. I want you to really realize and hone in on that you are an influencer in your own circle. And start being an influencer today by sharing this podcast with 2 or 3 friends or family members that you think it would impact their life. That's another great way to bring influence. Hey, thanks for being with me again here on the Men of Iron podcast this Monday. I hope you have a fantastic week, and we'll see you again next Monday right here on the Men of Iron podcast. Have a great week, guys. Peace.